Welcome to Check Your Shelf, an Alabama Take podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Hanna, and each month some friends and I will be discussing what we're currently reading, what's on our to-read list, and what books we think you might like to read too. Today I'm joined by Corey Hanna, who is not only the co-host of the Alabama Slam podcast, but he's also my husband. Hello, Corey.
Hello.
Thank you for being on the inaugural episode of Check Your Shelf.
You're welcome.
It's been a long road to get to this point.
But we're there.
We're there. I appreciate all of your support. Yeah. We were sidelined by my master's degree being more difficult in the last semester than we anticipated. We had COVID moved very slowly through our house one month. But yeah, now we're here and we are ready to talk books.
It's a real thing now.
It is a real thing. So first of all, I want you to tell our listeners why they'll be hearing you on this podcast every month.
Oh, I'll mostly be doing music books with my lovely bride. I haven't read much in the last, let's say, 5 years. And when I was reading, it was a lot of comic books and graphic novels. But I've sort of challenged myself to read more, and music is a thing that I am obsessed with. So I told you I'd do this podcast with you, and we'd read books.
It's all just a trick to get him to read books, is what it is. Yeah, so I'm really excited about this. That's one thing. Like, okay, so you're really cool.
Nope.
And very smart. But one thing that has always blown my mind is that you don't read a lot unless you were really into something. And we went through that. What were those the graphic novels you were reading? Like you were like really into like Saga and Preacher.
Yeah. I read a lot of comics over the course of a few years, probably starting around 2012. I read a lot of Marvel comics. And then around the time they started making Star Wars comics under the Marvel banner, Jason Aaron, who was one of my favorite writers at the time, shout out Alabama writer, he was also writing a series called Southern Bastards, which was amazing. It was an Image series. But yeah, I was just reading Star Wars. I read Preacher. I read Saga. Anything that Jason Aaron had written, I basically sought out and read. Various other things that friends recommended, but those were the ones that stuck the most. And before that, I would read just various things. I'd get a little obsessed about different things at different times. Went through the David Sedaris phase. Did some Michael Chabon, I think that's how you say his last name. Read a couple of his books. Read a whole bunch of Bradbury over the years, Ray Bradbury. And various other people, but I hadn't read willingly that much since probably almost 20 years ago, with the occasional random book here and there. I did read I figured out today, the last book I read before one of the things we're discussing later on was the Liberal Redneck Manifesto by Trey Crowder, Drew Morgan, and Corey Ryan Forrester. And that was about 5 years ago.
And you've been trying to get me to read that book, so I should read that book.
We'll do that at some point.
Yeah, since you're going to be reading things that I'm picking. So if you find the right things, you do enjoy reading, but you're just really like, you've got to really find that perfect thing to be into.
I'm very much an obsessive personality, and that becomes a thing with me. Also, too, the older I get, I'm just tired all the time. And by the time I get ready to go to bed, I'm ready to go to bed. And that's what I did a lot for several years while I was reading comics, was I would go to bed reading comics.
Okay. Yeah. So we're pretty opposite there then, because I want to read all the time. I'm a librarian by day. So I'm surrounded by books at work. And then I'm surrounded by books at home because I just keep bringing them here.
Well, we have a lot of music books now, more than we did before. We'd had a lot of music books before, but now we have even more.
Now we have lots, yeah.
So I know this, but the listeners do not know this. What do you like to read?
I will read pretty much anything that you put in my hands. I've been going back through my Goodreads and some bookshelves and stuff lately. I read a lot of nonfiction, which I have recently discovered is very polarizing. People either seem to love it or hate it. But I read a lot of. I like biographies. I have been reading a lot of graphic novels lately. I love YA, like young adult literature. Really, the only one of the biggest gaps probably for me was contemporary fiction, which is why when your buddy Patrick suggested I join Book of the Month Club, I jumped on that, and now I love Book of the Month Club, and I get my contemporary fiction recommendations from there, and I also follow like Reese Witherspoon's book club. I'm just not very good at choosing fiction, and I also don't like to stop reading a book once I've started. I just recently have had to have a real come to Jesus with myself that I'm 45 years old and I have a full-time job and I have limited time. So if I am 40 pages into a 400-page novel and I don't like it and I know it's not going to get any better, I need to stop reading it, and that's totally okay. So I've gotten better about that, dropping things off the Goodreads list. There's a lot of, we'll talk about Goodreads later. I carry a lot of shame in my Goodreads list, but yeah, so I read pretty much everything, but I want to read more fiction. So I'm kind of hoping that this podcast is going to help me do that, because I'll stay more up to date on what's coming out. Maybe get out of the thriller genre, because I really, really love thrillers. I have a real issue with the Dateline channel.
I know this.
I can't stop watching it, and I've started. And then I read true crime, and now I will read fake crime. It doesn't matter. Just as long as there's a mystery I can solve, I usually like it.
So who are some of your favorite authors?
David Sedaris is my all-time favorite author. And his book Calypso, that's probably my very favorite book. And then, let's see, for fiction, I always say Stephen King, but I'm kind of, I'm really going to make myself think about that this year, because I've said that for 25 years, but I don't know that he's my favorite author anymore.
There's no shame in that. Pearl Jam is still, consider them one of my favorite bands of all time, but they have been more or less since high school.
Yeah.
Are they still, depends on what day it is. Right now, I'm in a massive Pearl Jam phase, but it kind of comes and goes. You still kind of resort back to Stephen King, though, on a lot of things.
And that's true. And every once in a while, his new stuff, he'll throw out a new book that is so good. I'm like, okay, he still got it. But then the next three, I'll be like, but the older ones are so good. So yeah, I'm going to leave him on the list. I like Karen M. McManus. She writes kind of thriller mystery books for young adults, very similar to Christopher Pike books. My readers from the 80s will probably remember Christopher Pike. Those were the best books. Those are on my Christmas list, by the way. And let's see.
Note to self.
Yeah. A couple of my other very favorite books. I love The Wreckage of My Presence by Casey Wilson. That was my book of the year last year. And she was on a show called Happy Endings, which I never watched. After reading the book, I want to watch everything she's ever done. She's so funny, and the book was so sad and wonderful, and it was the first time that I laughed my way through a book and then cried during the acknowledgments at the end of the book. It's so good. And then The Perks of Being a Wallflower is one of my favorite books. And one of my other very favorite books is Lincoln in the Bardo by George Saunders, and I never recommend that to anybody, because it's experimental fiction, and it's about the death of Abraham Lincoln's son, but that's not really what it's about. And some of the things in the novel are historically accurate, some aren't. You can't tell which is which. But the audiobook, Nick Offerman and David Sedaris are two of the main narrators. Like, there's so many wonderful things about the book, but it's really weird, really super weird. But it won a bunch of awards. But so that kind of shows you, like, where if I'm just left to my own devices and Reese is not guiding me, like, where I will go with my fiction. Like, bring me the weirdest thing you have, and then that's what I'm going to read and love the most. So I'm trying to steer my ship in more popular waters because I need to keep up with that stuff, you know?
Librarian lady.
Yeah. One of my favorite book series, and we'll just use this as a segue to our next topic, is A Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin. Those are, like, people know them as the Game of Thrones book. Game of Thrones is actually the first one of the series. And I actually only read 3 of those as we were watching the show. I would read one of the books right before the season came out, and then they took book 3 and made that seasons 3 and 4. And then at that point, there was so much time, I just was like, never mind. And I just, leaned in. And also at that point, we knew that the showrunners and George R.R. Martin were not seeing eye to eye, so there's a chance when he finishes the books we're going to have a completely different story.
Right.
So
than what they ended up doing for the last couple seasons of the show.
Yes. So I wanted you and I to talk about The House of the Dragon, which is the show that we are currently watching. One out of the 2 of us is obsessed with and thinks about all the time.
I'm getting there.
I need you to hurry. I need you to really focus.
I'm more there than I was when we started the show. And I'll say this because if you're listening, you have no idea. I was dragged into it kicking and screaming. I was huge in Game of Thrones, and I thought that the last season was an intense and severe letdown, and I couldn't put myself through that again. And so I watched the first episode of House of the Dragon, kicking and screaming. Hadn't read the books on any of the Song of Ice and Fire things. So it didn't really, other than the show, Game of Thrones, I didn't have any idea what was happening. And then watched the first episode. I was like, okay, this is fine. And then the next night, you started watching it again. And I think I turned to you at one point and said, okay, I'm in. And then the second episode was pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third episode, the last 15 minutes were freaking amazing.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and we don't have to touch on that just yet. But yeah, I mean,
lots more dragons in this one.
Yeah. Damon, a.k.a. Matt Smith, just went Leroy Jenkins on everybody, and that was amazing. It was awesome.
Well, I've told you, like, I was kind of... Okay, so something that will be a recurring theme for me just in my life, and you'll see on the podcast, is I will think I don't like something, and I will like it very much.
Kenobi? Obi-Wan Kenobi,
yes,
Disney Plus?
Yes, exactly. And 2 things that apply to House of the Dragon are Matt Smith and dragons. I don't care about dragons. And now I'm reading like I want the history of the dragons. I want to know which dragon beget this dragon and the list of writers. Like I want a deep history of the dragons. And then Matt Smith, I never watched him as Doctor Who. I actually only watched 1 season of Doctor Who, and it was, I don't know if you remember this, but it was the Christopher Eccleston season.
I remember.
And then, like, the whole point is, like, different people are the Doctor, right? So, I think it was, like, the first episode of the next season, it's like he wakes up and it's David Tennant. And I was just like, I can't get behind this. And, like, I tried, like, 2 or 3 episodes in to like David Tennant, but I had loved Christopher Eccleston so much. I just couldn't. So I was like, Doctor Who for me is going to exist in this one perfect, beautiful season, and that's it. So I never got to Matt Smith, so I was not on the Matt Smith train. But then he showed up in The Crown as Prince Philip, young Prince Philip, and he was really good. It's like he's really good at that guy you love to hate. And, like, who comes across as a jerk but may not be 100%.
Which is exactly what they're doing with his character in Game of Thrones.
Yes. Yeah.
Shout out Little House of the Dragon, and I was listening to that on the way home today. Corey Ryan Forrester and Kirby, I forgot her last name, his sister, have a podcast about it, and they were talking about this very thing. They were like, his character is very Jaime Lannister-ish, where you start out hating him because he throws a kid out the window, and by the end of it, you're kind of like rooting for him because like maybe he was a little misunderstood. He did some terrible things, no doubt, in the beginning, and Daemon has done some not great things, but he also may just be a little bit misunderstood.
And did you there's a lot of the Game of Thrones stuff that I didn't remember, so it's helpful that I'm reading the entire internet about House of the Dragon because it's bringing some of this other stuff back. But we meet Daemon the same way we met Jaime, where he was sitting on the Iron Throne. And it's like not his place to be, but he's in there, and somebody walks in and is just like, "What are you doing here?" So it was very similar introductions on those. Well, one of the reasons that we're talking about House of the Dragon on a book podcast is because I am also reading at the same time Fire and Blood, the George R.R. Martin book that House of the Dragon is based on. And I did not know what I was getting into. The Song of Ice and Fire books, like you get different narrators and different perspectives, and it's just like a real solid fiction, just good storytelling. And this is more, it's a rich text. It's a tome.
It's very wordy, it looks like, by the size of that book.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's huge. And I think there's going to be another one. But it is a history, and it reads like a history. At which sometimes I'll be reading it before I go to bed, and I'm like, why do I like this so much? And I think it's because I like nonfiction, and it reads like nonfiction.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and then I sometimes forget this isn't real. No, I'm kidding. I just get really into my fandoms.
So, with how far you are into the book now, is it similar to the show? Or are they staying kind of faithful?
I couldn't tell you because I didn't know this until I got into it. I'm still like 4 generations behind where the show is.
Oh.
So I'm a little flummoxed about what the plan is.
Okay.
Because like they could have started a lot earlier in this book and had just as good of a story.
Well, I'm seeing that now on the cover of the book. It says 300 years before Game of Thrones, and I think they've pitched the TV show as 200 years before, right?
That sounds about right. Yeah.
Okay.
That sounds about right. So, so the people I'm reading about are, they're
fathers and grandfathers, and mothers and grandmothers of the characters we're learning about now.
Right. And also, because the first thing I did was study the family tree because I'm a big old nerd, and the Targaryen family tree is the worst thing in the world ever because you're trying to figure out sons and daughters, but like brothers and sisters are married, so there are all these extra lines and stuff that like you don't get on a regular family tree, and it's really confusing to know, it was not a good place for me to start. But so I'm excited to see when I get to the part of the history that the show picks up on what they do. If it's anything like it is currently, like they're just giving you the facts, and then the show is taking like the liberties and they're filling in the gaps and really giving you more of an idea about people's like personalities and things like that. So, and one of the things that I've run up on, just as an example, who is the bad guy that we're dealing with now? The crab guy. Yeah,
the crab guy is all I know.
Crab feeder.
Yeah.
Like he's only mentioned in the book 4 times. So he's not even like, it's not a big to-do in the book.
Well, I thought he was going to play more of a significant role in the show. And then if you haven't made it to episode 3 yet, you may want to skip this. But he's done. They made that abundantly clear. He gone. So this is a thing that I figure we should talk about. The source material. You have clearly established that if you watch a show, you like to go back and read the source material if you've not already. Do you think that's just the librarian in you that makes you want to do that?
I think it's the fangirl completionist. Like, I want to know everything, because if I'm gonna, like, I feel like I have a line, and when I cross that line, it goes from, oh well, this is fun recreational reading, to I want to know absolutely every single detail, and I want it to be based off of the source material, which, because like there's some good, like, for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, there's some really fun, like, you know, if you get into like fan fiction and stuff, like people are really doing cool, fun, like neat things with the characters. But I'm like, not canon. I need it to be canon all the time. That's why when I was reading, I was trying to choose some Star Wars books to read. I'm like, I'm not even a Star Wars person, but by God, it needed to it needed to be canon for me, just in case that ever mattered.
Sure.
Like what was going on in the books, if it applied somewhere else. Like I wanted to make sure that it was at least canon adjacent, I guess would be a good way to say it. But yeah, I just want to know absolutely everything. And a show like Game of Thrones, you have such gigantic books, and you can read and reread, and I don't know, it's just you have a lot of options. It's also why I'm a huge fan of, well, one of the many reasons I love the Marvel Cinematic Universe, like.
And you've gone back and read a bunch of comics.
Yes.
And new comics.
Yes.
To prep for, like, you read a bunch of Moon Knight to prep for Moon Knight.
Right, but I only read one specific run, and it was not the run that had anything to do with the show, which is kind of I kind of think it's cool that they do that, because you can kind of see where, like a really good example is the Matt Fraction run of Hawkeye. Like the aesthetics of Hawkeye, like the show really kind of, you could tell were inspired by that run of comics, but it's like there were certain things from the comics that they used, but a lot of it just kind of went sideways. So I like that they do that. Also, with like in the Walking Dead graphic novels, which I know you read a lot of, Daryl's not in those.
Right.
He's the best character on the show to me, if we still watch the show on a regular basis. He was when we stopped watching it. So I do like when they take the liberties. But I also just like to really, really dig in. Like and I'm not in a good place right now with with this fire and blood. I have other things I need to focus on, but I'm listening to like 10 hours of podcasts a week. I think I told you that's unreasonable. That should not be happening. So it's like I'm reading the book, I'm listening to podcasts, I'm watching each episode like twice. It's just I'm hoping this will cool off and I'll move on to something else, but I don't know. Right now it's pretty
intense.
It's pretty intense, yeah. I wanted to ask you something else, especially before we go into our next segment. How do you feel about audiobooks? Because as a librarian, I get this a lot, that audiobooks don't count. And I'm sure you can guess where I stand on it, but I want to know your thoughts on that.
I've never really been on one side of the fence or the other, but the next thing that we'll discuss, having been the first book that I've read in 5 years or so, I was concerned about my comprehension level. So we own the book, and we got the audio book on Audible, I guess it was. Mm-hmm. And I read it, and while I was reading it, I was listening to the author read. And that made, I feel like, a major difference. I still have a hard time with retention. I've always had a hard time with retention. Like, you can ask me in a week about the thing I just watched, and I can't tell you much about it. It's just, unless I watch it or read it multiple times. But I do feel like it helped. It might be a little different if it's not the author or someone you know. Like if it's just some random author you've never heard of, I don't think it really matters. But I feel like the source material on the next subject was important to be read in the author's voice. Before we get to that, though, let's talk about a note that you sent me that says your favorite characters and least favorite characters in House of the Dragon.
Yeah.
Where do you stand on the characters of that show?
Damon, 100,000% is my favorite character. That may be some rollover from Jaime Lannister. I like that kind of arc.
I love a good redemption arc.
I do too. So I've got a lot of stock in him right now. Also, some of my podcasts, like, it's people who have already read the book, so I'm hearing things that are going to happen in the future. And I'm trying not to let that affect how I feel about people, but oh my God, things are going to get, it's going to be so good.
I saw some TikToks today. I think I sent you one of them where they just flat out picked a scene from Game of Thrones, the show, and basically said everything that's going to happen to a couple of the characters that we are introduced to now. And because they were talking about the history of the Targaryens. I'm like, oh, okay, well, spoilers, that's what happens on this show / in this movie. Mm-hmm. But I mean, at this point, I'm still interested to see how we get there. There's a lot of story left to be told.
Yeah, and I'm super intrigued by Alicent. That I think that actress is doing a fantastic job, because I still feel... I know that, like, her father is like a real son of a gun that wants everything manipulated in his favor, but I really feel like she's not there. Like, I feel like she's having to listen to a lot of different voices, but she's still trying to do the right thing. Yeah. And I think they have, like, she and the king have a real connection and da-da-da-da-da, but...
A little creepy, but...
Well, I mean, what's not with the Targaryen? Like, at least they're not cousins or something, so... But yeah, I like
But he
her.
seems like he's a good guy, and he's trying to do... The king is. He's trying to do the right thing for the most part, except for that whole thing about his wife. Mm-hmm. And, like, giving her a say in the matter on how this whole birth goes down. That was a little messed up. But, yeah, I mean, other than that, I feel like... He's trying to do the right thing and look after people and protect his daughter. He's not the best at vocalizing that sort of thing. But that's interesting, the way it's played out.
And I love how he feels. I don't want to say anything for people who haven't watched episode 3 yet, but the way he is addressing the whole heir situation, like, because he's made the daughter the heir. People are not happy with it. Where are they going to go moving forward? You know, especially with he and Alicent, as they have children. Which, you know, if things were cut and dried, we wouldn't have these shows. We wouldn't have these books.
True.
Because it's all about, like, you know, Game of Thrones. You've got 5 different people, and you, from their perspective, they should be on the Iron Throne, but that's not
how it works.
That's not how it works. Yeah. So I love this stuff. Oh my God, it's so good. So good. So you would say Daemon is one of your favorite characters?
Yeah. Just because of the intrigue factor there. And if it's not cut and dry with him, I don't think. Do I think he's a piece of crap? Yeah. But do I think that there's some good in him and that he's gotten the short end of the stick because he's, you know, the little brother. Mm-hmm. He's dealt with that his whole life, so he's going through some stuff. Also really like Rhaenyra. At first, when they first introduced her on the show, I was like, I don't know, this be kind of, I don't know if I'm going to be in for this, but she is very strong-willed and very strong-minded. I mean, it just there's a lot to like there, and she's very interesting. And in this 3rd episode, even more so, sort of cemented that. They're probably my 2 favorites at this point.
Yeah, good choices. I love how when they're she's out in episode 1 with Alicent, and Alicent's like, just study, just do this reading, and she's like, I want to eat cake. And then, like, later on that episode, it's like she parrots back the information from the book. Like, she's spending the time and doing the work. She just doesn't want anybody to know.
Right.
So yeah, I think she's such a good complex character. And there's one thing I know that's going to happen in the future that it's just going to. It's going to be so good. It's going to be so good. I'm so excited. And it's been picked up for season 2. Like, there was any chance it wouldn't be. So we'll just have to see what they do as far as the book goes, see what else they pull from the book and where they decide to go next. I'll be interested to see those choices because they have a lot of options. All right. Are you ready to do book club?
Yes. Yes, I am.
I'm so excited to talk about a book with you that you read.
I finished it a whole 24 hours ago.
Well, and I finished it today, so you beat me. So what we read for this month is The Storyteller by Dave Grohl. It's his memoir. It's really good. We thought it was kind of timely because the Taylor Hawkins benefit just happened this last weekend, which you watched a lot of. You sent me some highlights that...
I watched about 99% of it, yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Very emotional and cathartic and beautiful. And, I love loud rock and roll music. I love music in general, but I love loud rock and roll music. And the power that you can feel from that, and the connection that it gives you to other people in this world.
What was the best part?
A couple of cool moments for me was Wolfgang Van Halen. I felt like kind of trolled the trolls who have been begging him for his band to play Van Halen music, and he's like, "I'm not going to play Panama." They're like, my dad would not want me to play Van Halen music. My dad would want me to play my music. My dad was very proud of my music, and that's what he would want me to do. So, but Taylor Hawkins was a big influence and friend to Wolfgang, so very fittingly they paid tribute to Eddie Van Halen and Taylor Hawkins by playing, Wolfgang played guitar, Dave Grohl played bass, Josh Freese, who's played with a ton of different bands, played drums, and then Justin Hawkins from The Darkness played a couple of Van Halen songs and just absolutely killed it. And then AC/DC singer Brian Robinson, almost messed that up, sang a couple of AC/DC songs with the Foo Fighters, but with Lars Ulrich from Metallica on drums. That was amazing.
Very cool.
I didn't think Brian would ever really sing again because he's had some sing again live. He sang in studio and released an album a couple years, but didn't think he would sing live because of severe hearing loss. So that was amazing. Didn't see that coming. And then, to me, the best part of the day was when the Foo Fighters played at the end of the show. They had a couple different people play drums with them, and started off the show, or their set, with this little video montage of Taylor Hawkins and some interviews and some pictures and, behind the scenes sort of clips. And I was like, oh, that's pretty sad and emotional and blah, blah, blah. And then Dave started playing Times Like These by himself. Kind of the way they've been doing it live the last couple of years with just like a keyboard, like an organ. Mm-hmm. And he was singing slow. And then right before it gets loud at the end, he had like a little breakdown on stage. And I was like, oh, I was a sobbing mess. I don't get that way about celebrity deaths. But as I mentioned earlier, like I'm getting older. Rock and roll can be a beautiful thing, and it was at its most beautiful the other day, I thought. And then so I finally collected myself a song or two later, and then at the end they brought out Taylor's 15-year-old son. Mm-hmm. And like the moment he hit the first drum note on My Hero, I just bawled again. I knew it was coming. I couldn't stop it. It was just powerful. I mean, this kid was up there just killing it. And that is not an easy song to play on drums.
Did you know that he played drums? Like, did you know that Taylor?
I didn't have the slightest. I didn't know this. Have the slightest idea. Like the Van Halen thing was really cool to me because Taylor was a huge Van Halen fan. Like, he had a band called Chevy Metal who, on a couple different occasions, played like all Van Halen covers at their shows. Mm-hmm. And most times when he was on stage, he was in like Eddie Van Halen red and white or either black and yellow striped shorts and or like tight pants. Mm-hmm. That's why he played drums in. So yeah, it was just awesome, and it's very fitting that we were finishing up this book. Did we plan it that way, that we finished up around?
No,
it just happened to be that way.
I think when we first decided on this book, I think it was before Taylor died, wasn't it? When did Taylor die?
Because it's been a while since we started talking about this.
Yeah. So yeah, there's been a lot that's happened. And then I thought Violet Grohl did a great job.
Yeah.
She's amazing, and he talks about her in the book a lot,
Yeah.
having perfect pitch. Isn't she?
I think he mentioned that early on in the book. Yeah,
because he's got one with perfect pitch, and then the middle one is the one that's like so rhythmic. Like he taught her to play. He's taught her to play the drums and stuff. So I think he's going to have a little family of musicians. But were you glad that we chose this book?
Yeah, I'm a big Dave Grohl fan. I say I'm a big Dave Grohl fan in that I don't own every Foo Fighters record. I haven't even listened to the last Foo Fighters record from top to bottom. I've heard the singles, but like the songs of Dave Grohl and the Foo Fighters that are the big hits, like they're just perfect rock songs. Mm-hmm. And there's so many of them at this point because they've been around for so long. And I just feel like he's probably one of the nicest guys on the face of the planet.
Yeah, yeah.
You never hear a bad story about him. He just seems so genuine and down to earth. And that's why I felt it was important to listen to the audiobook while reading the book, to hear the stories from his voice.
I think that it's a perfectly titled memoir also, because I've read a lot. I love a celebrity memoir, and I read a lot, and this is probably by far one of the best that I've ever read. I think it was well written. I think what he chose, like the stories he chose for the book, there was some overlap, which most people have not seen the back and forth documentary 714 times like I have, but there was some overlap with some of the stuff. But so what? Like, you kind of expect that kind of thing. But yeah, I thought it was really, really well done. Like, I will definitely be recommending this to people. I mean, even if you're not a Nirvana fan or a Foo Fighters fan, like, it's just, but you like good nonfiction, I think it's just a good book, and the writing style was really clear and funny, and I think he did a great job. It's
wild to me that, like, I never really thought about it in terms of time, but he only knew Kurt Cobain for 6 or 7 years.
That was one of the revelations for me from the book, because it seemed like we had, because of the time in our lives, because we're both Gen Xers, went to high school in the 90s, and Nirvana was such a huge part, like, of our high school experience. So it feels like we had them forever. Yeah,
not to date us too much, but Nevermind hit when we were freshmen in high school in 91. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yep.
And then just a few years later, 6, 7 years later, Kurt was dead.
I thought it was 94. Was it not? Were we not still in high school?
Yeah. No, time out. Let's think on that a minute, because with 91 is when the record hit real big, and Dave joined the band 3 months before they recorded that album. So I think he was 20.
Okay.
He said in the book. And when he moved to Seattle to join that band.
He died April 8th, 1994.
Wow.
Not to be a complete know-it-all, but I remembered being in high school, and I was in the car that I drove in high school, and I was listening to KDF out of Nashville, and that's where I heard it.
So maybe it was shorter amount of time then.
Yeah.
Because, you're right, because I remember waking up the morning I had to go take the ACT test, and it was on MTV News that Kurt Cobain had died, and I was like, wait, what's happening here?
So from that timeline, then it was really only 3 or 4 years, right? That
it wasn't together. That long.
And I can't, like, when he, in the book, when Dave talks about how fast, like, I think that's what really I had never really thought about, because it's like you hear like Kurt Cobain had a hard time with the stardom and the popularity and the things that came with that, but like when he's like, we were here 1 week, and then the next week we were at this other place, and our lives were completely different because everybody knew who Kurt was. And then Dave talks about how he's like, dude, I'm just the drummer, nobody sees me back there.
Yeah.
So he's like,
he talked about being able to like go places and walk around.
Yeah. His life was just enhanced by the money and like what came with the fame. But Kurt being the front man, like it was a totally different.
Kurt
totally
was
different experience.
the one that was on the cover of all the magazines by himself, and you know, his picture was everywhere when the band was mentioned. So yeah, it was wild. There were a lot of really good stories in there, but it makes you think about the passage of time, knowing how quickly that happened, and then, you know, we had all heard the stories about how he put Foo Fighters together, but there were some neat stories in there about the band along the way that I hadn't heard before. And then, you know, just getting to know a little more about his family, and then him getting to meet his idols and people he had looked up to his whole life, like Lemmy from Motorhead and Paul McCartney, and, you know, that's wild. Like, he's become really good friends with Paul McCartney, which a lot of people don't get to say they did.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I love this book very much, but one of the things that I want another book from him. That's my problem. That's not a Dave Grohl problem. I want to know more details. But he had that really awesome section where he's talking about like the different, you know, celebrities, the people who've inspired him, who he's met and become friends with. And it's like, you don't really know how I want to know how you met Paul McCartney. Like, how did this originate? Like, that's really cool. He's at your house playing piano with your kid, but how did you get to that point? And I don't know that you heard this on the audiobook, because I think the other day when I think I remember hearing when you turned it off and you missed this. After the credits, he tells that story.
I did turn off the credit.
I mean, because who wouldn't? So after the credits roll, he's just like, hey, it's Dave. Wait, let me tell you one other thing. And then it's like, I guess it's a section that got cut from the book, but it was how he met Paul McCartney, and it was a great story. Like, it was a super good story, because George Harrison's son is the one who made it happen.
Okay.
Yeah, and he met him because he was a Foo Fighters fan and came backstage to one of their concerts and invited them to this George Harrison tribute. And it was such a good story, and things made more sense. I need to get something off my chest. I want us to think about this for a minute. And I'm sorry to be dragging my podcast into this, but you know how I really love a celebrity relationship. I really like to know what's going on, right?
Your Instagram followers the people you follow tells a lot.
It does. I will follow a C or D list celebrity to know what's going on with the B lister. It's okay. It's a way of life. Okay, so he was talking about, there's a section in the book where he's talking about going to that psychic who speaks French.
Yeah.
And his girlfriend took him. Do you remember that?
I do.
Do you remember that he said she's a musician?
Yeah.
I almost broke my phone Googling that so hard. Do you know who it was? You don't know. It was.
No, it was.
If you get this right.
No, but he had her. She's the voice in Everlong over the phone recording that's going do 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 do. I've heard this story. He called her and had her record that over the phone. It's not the Veruca Salt lady, right?
Right. Wait a minute. So is that song about his breakup with her? And he had her call, and he called her, and
I think it was, they were together while it happened.
Oh, okay.
But I can't pull the name right now.
Because Everlong may have been about his first wife, Melissa Alfdemar.
Oh.
But this is the thing. She was in Hole. She was in Hole with Courtney Love.
Yeah.
And then, according to Do Not Laugh at Me, who'sdatedwhom.com.
You knew I was going to laugh at that.
They dated in 2000 to 2001. So would that not have been deep into the Dave Grohl, Courtney Love, like, we hate each other thing? And how weird would that be?
Yeah, but was Hole still a thing at that point? No, because when I saw the Smashing Pumpkins, Melissa Alfdemar, is that how you say her name? She was the bass player because Darcy had quit. Now, that doesn't mean that she wasn't also still in Hole. But that's when I saw the Pumpkins, was in like 99 or 2000.
She's just a little out there. But yeah, so I thought that was kind of crazy because I started doing this Nirvana math, and I was like, how is she dating him and in a band with like his nemesis? But I didn't really lean into the timeline like I should have, so that probably would have explained it better. So speaking of talking about Nirvana, I kept going back. He would talk about something, and then I would Google it to watch the video, like when he was on SNL and broke the drumstick.
Oh, yeah.
And then he talked about Kurt being so high on the Come As You Are video shoot.
Yeah.
So I was like, went back and watched the Come As You. That's why it took me so long to finish this book, was I went back and I wanted to watch
Deep
all
dive
these things.
McGee over here.
Yeah, that he was talking about. So, what do you think? What do you think was your favorite story from the book before we move on?
I don't know. I thought it was a little funny, having watched the Fresh Pots video several times over the years. And funny's not the right word, because he was having chest pains and thought he was having a heart attack, but...
Not when they made that Fresh Pots video. That was so funny, though.
Yeah. So, but knowing what he was doing, like juggling the two bands and trying to have a home life as well, like, that's why he was drinking 5 pots of coffee a day, right?
Right.
I thought that was interesting to get that whole backstory. I liked some of the early stuff before he was in bands, when he was starting to appreciate music and that sort of thing. Like, to get a little deeper dive, because you got a little bit of that. Like, we knew he used to play his pillows like drums and stuff like that, but like there was a little bit more of a deep dive into that I liked. And I liked the story about his mom taking him to the jazz club and getting up there and you know, playing with those guys, or trying to play with those guys, and taking one drum lesson and then being like, I think I'm going to just try to figure this out myself.
Yeah. And I knew, I'd seen him in interviews talk about how he can't read, he doesn't read music, like, and he has his own way. And then to find out in the book it's based on Legos.
Yeah, that was nuts.
I was like, that's crazy. Like the way was it called
synesthesia or something like that?
Yes, I think so. Yeah. But the way he writes his music for the drums, right? It looks like it's based off of basically how Lego blocks go together. So. My very favorite thing I had a lot of favorite parts in the book, but this is my very favorite thing, and then we're going to move on. He had a quote, and I need like this on a tattoo. And it was, life is just too damn short to let someone else's opinion steer the wheel. Hallelujah. Is that not the best quote you have ever heard?
Cool. Yeah.
And he said a lot of really cool, wise things in this book. Like, he's learned a lot, but that one I was like, that's the way to go. So I came out loving him even more.
I would totally hang out with Dave Grohl.
Oh my God, yes. Yeah. I think I would pick to hang out with him over a lot of musicians whose music I like better. Okay, so Corey, Hannah, next month we're going to be reading and discussing Music is History by Questlove. It's I think that's his newest book.
Why are we reading that one?
We're reading it because we're going to go see the Roots.
Woohoo!
Oh, so excited. They're coming to our town.
About a mile from our humble abode.
Yeah, I just never, they are one of my favorite bands. I love Questlove, like, on a very deep level. And I just never dreamed that I would ever see them in concert. And I don't even know what they're doing. It's not even like a regular...
It's some sort of country act, which is very interesting.
That's whatever.
It makes me think there'll be a lot of special guests.
I don't care. That's fine, whatever.
I'm for it.
I told you Questlove could just get up there and, like, just chat. And I would have paid exactly what I paid for those 6-row tickets.
I'm for it.
Yeah, we're excited. So I've been excited to read this book. I think it's going to be a fun read. And if anybody out there wants to read it before we discuss it, somebody, and I cannot remember their name, but I'm very grateful, put together a Spotify playlist of the artists and songs in the order that Questlove discusses them in the book. So this is basically a book about the history of music written by a music historian. So there's lots and lots and lots of songs and acts. So I'm really happy that this person took what had to have been a gigantic amount of time to put this together, but I'll be listening to that as I read through it. So, all right. So let's take a short break, and then we will come back and talk about the heinousness that is my Goodreads account. Okay, so now this section of the podcast, this will be a recurring segment. I don't have a name yet because every name I've come up with has been stupid. But it's just basically where it's a book podcast. So out of any book podcast, I would want there to be a section where somebody goes through and tells me what they're reading, and maybe just suggests some books that I should be reading. So the way I've done this, I thought I will just jump on my Goodreads account and I will look at what I am currently reading, and what I have recently finished that I like, and I will use that as my information for this section. I need to get my affairs in order. That Goodreads account is a hot mess. Hot mess. There are books on there there's one book I have not picked up since the election. I'm pretty sure
that was probably around the last time I read a book.
But I just why is it on
Or no,
there?
which election? You're talking about the last election.
Yeah.
I'm talking about 2 elections ago.
I don't know. There's so much on there. So, and there are things that I was actively reading and then put down and completely forgot I was reading and just started reading other things. My reading style is absolute chaos.
We have books in all corners.
We do.
Of our abode.
We seriously do, and that's on me. So
I love it.
But yeah, so I'm going to be cleaning up that Goodreads account, and I will not probably ever refer to it again because it is just a terrible place. And it's got my to read list on there is basically anytime I've ever walked by, heard, or saw somebody mention a book to me, I put it on that to read list. So it's not a useful situation. Okay, but here are some books that I am currently reading or have recently read that I think are excellent, and there are folks out there who might like them. I have no idea why I put this one first. It is called Tomi, or I think the actual Japanese pronunciation is Tomie. It is a manga. It's a horror manga by an author named Junji Ito. This is not a book I would ever have found on my own. I was talking to another librarian a few months ago, and I said, I've never found a manga that I've really enjoyed. So if you say things like that to a librarian, that is a direct challenge. And they were like, what do you like? Give me give me kind of a brief overview of your personality. And then just 2 hours later, I had a Junji Ito book on my desk. And let me tell you, it is dark. It is bloody. There are body horror elements. It is terrifying. If this were a movie, I would not watch it because I'm a chicken. But I cannot get enough of these books. And he has lots of books. But Tomi was the one that I started with. And it's basically about a girl who is cursed. And everybody who falls in love with her becomes cursed. And she just will not stay dead. And anything else would be spoiling it. So that is Tomi by Junji Ito. The next book I want to recommend, Corey, I think you would like this one. It's Colin Jost's memoir, A Very Punchable Face. And I will be honest, I did not like him until he came out with this book and I saw that it was called A Very Punchable Face. Because that's kind of how I feel about him. I was just why
do you hate Colin Jost?
I don't know. It's just he's funny, but I'm just what's he
he
really
does have
like?
a very punchable face.
He does. Yeah, I think he just looks like he would be real smarmy and stuff. And the thing is, he knows it, and he writes about it in this book, and he's just a big old nerd who happened to grow up cute. He's a cute adult. He was not a cute kid. And he's just nerdy, and he had no self-confidence, and he was not good at there were all these things he wasn't good at. He really didn't kind of find his thing until he was in college. But it's so funny. I've laughed out loud many times. I like him now when I see him on the television. I don't.
Is there a lot of SNL coverage in there?
I think there's gonna be. I'm not there yet, but I'm sure there will be because he's already. I think we just finished the Harvard Lampoon section, so he should be about the age where he starts at SNL. So, the next book is Happy Go Lucky by David Sedaris. I love that book. That's probably my second favorite David Sedaris book. His father has recently passed away, so this book is the time period right before his father dies. A lot of it takes place during the pandemic. So like the rest of us, he was having to figure out what he was going to do with himself and with his future, and your perspective shift and things like that. So that is Happy Go Lucky by David Sedaris. Super duper funny, but also it has real poignant moments, so I would recommend that. So those are my recommendations. A book I'm about to start reading is Final Girls by Riley Sager. A lot of my friends who like thrillers have been reading the Riley Sager novels. So I'm going to be reading that and whatever book of the month sends me. And I don't know what that is because I wait anxiously for the selections to drop. And then I go through and I order not the one book of the month, but the book of the month plus the 2 extras that you are entitled to for the low, low price of $9.99. This is not an ad. And then I forget what I ordered.
And then it's like a surprise.
It's like a surprise every single month. So, and shout out to my friend Morgan, who is also a book of the month lover like I am. And she asked me Sunday via text what I had ordered, and I have just left her hanging because I could not remember, and I refuse to look it up because I want it to be a surprise. But yeah, the book of the month is what has happened to my end table in our bedroom, or my bedside table.
That's fine.
All of those books are book of the month selections that I haven't read yet. There's a lot of them, especially when you're getting 3 a month. With good intentions, Corey, Hannah, I'm the best. Like, it's going to come in and I'm going to start it that day, and it goes in my pile. So
yeah, we're busy.
Yeah, we are. Never too busy to read, though. Okay, Corey, why don't you tell us before we sign off about some of the other podcasts and news coming out of the Alabama Take?
Yeah, so many years ago, founder of the Alabama Take, Blaine Duncan, was living in Tuscaloosa, and I believe they were all rooming together. It was T.D. Wood and Caleb Johnson started a site called the Alabama Take, where they could just basically, it was a blog where they could share their thoughts on different things, and all 3 of those fellows are fairly progressive in a state that is not known for being very progressive. And so they all kind of, moved away and did their own different things and started families and this, that, and the other. And then a few years ago, Blaine decided he wanted to revitalize it and make it a site about just general writings that he was doing. Whether he was reading a book, he wanted to review it, listen to an album, review it, or watching a TV show or a movie. He wanted to write about things that he had just enjoyed. And it's taken a little life of its own in the last couple of years. There's been a few podcasts that have joined the little network. Blaine's got a podcast called Taking It Down with a couple other folks. It kind of changes here and there. For the most part, it's Donovan and Adam, and sometimes Adam's wife. They talk about mostly TV and movies, but pop culture in general. There's a bunch of different folks writing for the site now, different essays and reviews and things. And then I have a podcast with my buddy Patrick Akers called The Alabama Slam. We mostly review or recap All Elite Wrestling Dynamite and the pay-per-views that go along with that. Sometimes we'll throw in some Rampage coverage. So that comes out every Friday morning. And then I'm starting a new podcast with some of my best friends in the whole world called We Are a Star War. It's just three guys talking about Star Wars. We met in college. Corey and Jim met before that in high school, but I met those 2 guys in college and became fast friends, and we've been obsessed with Star Wars. And during the pandemic, we just basically started a group thread about Star Wars, and it's become our daily group thread. And it's mostly 90% of the time still about Star Wars. So we decided we'd start a podcast about it. And then there's This Song Sucks, which is coming back soon. I think that'll be out in the next month or 2. And then Take It on Sports. T.D. Wood is back. He's got a weekly sports podcast. A lot of football. We're in football season now, so there's a lot of football stuff there. But that's a great new podcast for everyone. So we've got podcasts for everybody. We've got this new book podcast with my lovely wife. There's the Alabama Slam, Taking It Down, Taking on Sports, and This Song Sucks. You can follow it all on the Alabama Take on Facebook. Blaine does a good job of promoting everything there. And then we each all have our separate social medias on Instagram. So look them all up.
Yeah, and this podcast will be Check Your Shelf Podcast on Instagram and also TikTok. As soon as we figure out how to TikTok, we're going to have lots of really good
We're a couple of olds.
Have some good book talk content on there. And you can always reach out to me, Jamie, at checkyourshelfpodcast@gmail.com if you have any books you think I should read and talk about on the podcast, or have any questions or anything. Before we go, I want to thank Megan Hamilton for our theme song. It is from her song Harris off of her album Feudal Ladies Club.
Shout out Meg.
Yay, Meg, my favorite Canadian. So she has that album and some others on Spotify, so you should check her out if you like our theme song. But otherwise, Corey, I will see you next month for Rock and Roll Book Club. I said I wasn't going to call it that.
I think that's what it's called now.
That's the name. I'm sorry.
That's fine. I love it.
I don't know.
Don't overthink it.
Okay, well, that's how
I think that's what it's called now.
Okay. And then I'm going to have another guest talk about, we're probably going to talk about like horror novels and things like that for October. I was also trying to avoid that cliche, but I'm like, that's all I want to read right now for Halloween.
Don't fight it.
So yeah, we're just going to lean into it. So, but thank you all for listening, and we will talk to you in the first Wednesday in October.